Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Elena Jareva. I work with the Department of Transportation in their local government division. And this morning I have the privilege of introducing these two ladies with SRF Consulting. Marie Cote is the current Chief People Officer for SRF, and she's been with SRF for 30 years and was very instrumental in developing their Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And Stacy Johnson also works with SRF. She's been there for about 11 years, and she works primarily with highway and ADA design. And she's also very active with their DE&I committee. So today they'll be talking about a program that they have developed through that committee called Courageous Conversations. So let's give them a warm welcome.
Good morning. I want to start with saying that this is a great opportunity for us to share what we're doing with our company. Over the 30 years that I've been at SRF, we have worked really hard to increase our staff diversity from a gender perspective, but also from ethnicity. In addition to some of these things that we're really doing well with the committee that we have. So again, myself and Stacy are part of our DEI committee. Today we're going to talk about just overall what we're doing for our DEI at SRF. Then we have our Courageous Conversations that Stacy is going to go into detail with, our 2021 sessions, future sessions, and then there are some insights as we move forward. So to start with, in our committee, we decided to develop a vision statement. So our diversity, equity, and inclusion vision statement is that SRF cultivates a diverse, equitable, and inclusive environment where all individuals feel respected, acknowledged, and empowered to bring their authentic selves to work. Our diversity drives our innovation, our inclusivity drives our approach. So how did we get started? I don't know why I don't have the date in here, but I'm pretty sure it was somewhere between 2019 and 2020. What happened is that our younger staff at SRF really use their voice. They let us know what they want, and they bring ideas to us all the time. As part of my job, I oversee all the committees that we have at SRF. We have a social committee, we have a staff engagement committee, we have a community outreach committee, etc. So younger staff came to me and said, at the time it was DI. So if you were to Google, right, it used to be diversity and inclusion. And so the staff came and they said that they wanted to develop a committee, which then we took volunteers, and we actually had too many that we had to start with the first group. So then what we did is we took it up to leadership, and we decided that we would have a director who was an advisor to the group. We have someone from HR, just because of the topics that it entails, right, to keep everybody in line with our messaging company-wide. And then we had a marketing and communications representative so that they could deal with social media, right, any of our materials for any of our events. So why DEI so then it changed to diversity, equity, and inclusion over time. But why did we do this? We worked together again as a committee. It's an action-oriented committee working towards mitigating and ending prejudice within our workplace and greater communities, and to bring a wide range of experiences from personal and professional lives. The value-driven goals that they developed is to build a staff representative of the communities we serve through active recruiting and engagement. To include and engage all employees and encourage everyone to share and be heard. So one of the things that I told the group when we first started is, I'm not going to tell them what to do. And actually that's how all of our committees are, our social communities, the community organizations. I really let them come up with the ideas. We will rarely say no, but I don't want this to be a committee, especially due to the type of committee, where leadership is dictating, here's what we're doing, here are our goals, and here are our activities. So in order for them to be on the committee, they had to be engaged. We didn't want people coming to the meetings and then they never say anything. Now, I don't call them out in the meeting, but I may offside say, hey, we want to hear your voice, right, if you're part of the committee. And then the third bullet is to incorporate equity and inclusion into SRF's company culture and workplace policies. So some of the things that we did, and I think the first one is most important, not on this list that I should have added, is the committee asked if we could do some leadership training, inclusivity training. And what they meant by that is they want to make sure that our C-suite, that our VPs, that our directors, and our managers really believed in this. And they thought that maybe not everybody, that maybe some people were nodding their head, but they didn't really believe in doing this for the company. So we did have a training, and it was a wonderful training on, making people feel included, but how do you feel like an other, right? In many different ways. So we had it as part of one of our spring business meetings where we did a full-blown training. It went so well that then when COVID hit, it was very easy to take that training and do it virtually, right? Because now you can have 250 people, or I'm not sure how many attended. She had to change it a little bit, but it was much easier to reach the entire company across our 7 offices versus trying to bring everybody to one office. So some of the other things that we have on here that I'm really proud of the committee is, the first one is monthly calendar observance emails to boost awareness it's really for religious, ethnic, and cultural festivities. So for instance, we just had one on an Indian holiday, we'll do a Jewish holiday, we'll do veterans, but we actually have the list of important events for the month, but then we also have a story about a person. And so if someone has a Jewish holiday, they will include their family picture, and they have to write it themselves. So we ask for volunteers, and they share the story. I mean, we had a great one on a veteran, right? There was a Hispanic event, but people will just constantly be saying, thanks for sharing your story, because then they get to know our employees on a deeper level. The second one is, which took us a little while to do, is to develop a DEI plan. So we wanted to develop our core values and goals for a more inclusive workplace. It was important for leadership, the president, CEO. He wanted everybody to be able to provide input. So we developed a plan, and it went out company-wide, so that if people had questions or comments before we fully finalized it. So the goals that we have, we try really hard to refresh them every year with the committee members on how we can challenge ourselves to do more things. The third one was last year, is that there's an internship position program in Minneapolis where it is a high school student with a diverse background that we had in the office, right, to teach them, engineering or landscape architect, to give them a flavor of opportunities that are out there. The fourth one is 2 different things. So we eat a lot at SRF. So every lunch, we have a brown bag, we're ordering lunch. We have a team meeting, someone's ordering lunch. And so I asked the question, do we have to keep ordering from Jimmy John's, right? I mean, so we actually asked our St. Paul office and our Minneapolis office to research, Black-owned companies, right, disadvantaged small business owners, to try different food vendors. We even changed over our, I don't know how you say it, but like the people who make all our copies and our final reports. When I found out that the company we were using was tied to a past owner from 30 years ago, it's like, what? So we did a little bit of research, and again, we found a Black-owned small business in Minneapolis. And we started off small, right? Because we didn't want like our big proposal to go wrong. So we did our business cards, right? And we did some flyers, and now they're a company that we use. When we have events like a retirement party, one that I was involved with. I really did some research on getting multiple, like people that are making the cakes and people that are making the food and whatnot. So that was a big thing. Now you can't always do it, but we're just trying to make people more aware. Our new office is in the city of Minneapolis, I think for the last 2 years. So it was important for us to support the Minneapolis businesses that surround us. And then the second part of the fourth one is our diverse teaming partners. In Minnesota, MnDOT has a more strict requirement that you have to meet for some of our large projects. Hennepin County is another one that has a very strict, but what was happening is we were having difficulty finding enough of them. Because you find a good one, and that good one is used for like everybody, right? So they get overworked. So we started to do more digging on taking someone under our wing and actually mentoring them. They may not have the right training, they may not have the right certifications, but to actually work with them so that they can learn with us on a project. So then the next project, that investment that we made, right, is easier for us to team with. The next one is STEM volunteer opportunities in diverse schools. This one is a hard one. We always say that in order to have a more diverse workplace, you have to start at like middle school, right? I mean, you have to really get them to understand, you know, what is an engineer? You know, what is landscape architect, right? Some of the challenge we can have, a particular organization is, unfortunately, the young Hispanic and Black kids, they want you to look like them, right? And now I could go, but I'm not. Well, there is an Asian part of the community, but it was mainly Hispanic. So now we have to actually ask specific people in the company, and they went. They had a blast, and the kids really liked them. It is a time commitment to get people to do that, but we just believe again that we want to get into the schools that surround us in the Minneapolis area. And then the last one is the Courageous Conversations. This is one that came up that we've been doing for quite a while now, that Stacy will go through. I think the main thing that I want to say about this is that we have these conversations where, you know, I'm reminding our leadership team, you guys need to attend, right? I mean, you have to support this. And then when you do a breakout session, you may have a grad, right? And you may have the president in the same breakout session. And it's great conversations because they're able to see who he is as the president on maybe a complex issue or a sensitive issue, and they have a voice to be able to have that same conversation. And some of them can be uncomfortable, but with that, I think this is my last slide. Oh, okay, so she's gonna go on that. Then the last thing that we've recently been doing, which is ending with today, is we attended the Minnesota conference in May 2022. We had someone else on the committee present. We had numerous competitors, other engineering firms asking us, like, how did you start this? How can we start this? We had questions from MnDOT. We then decided to do a water resource conference, and then we did a WTS presentation, and then with today's presentation. We just think that if we can share what we're doing, then it will give everybody ideas to ask themselves, okay, so what can we do at our company or within our agency? So with that, now I'll get to Stacy.
Yes, as Marie said, part of our DEI committee, we worked on the series of Courageous Conversations, which we've taken a lot of pride as part of the committee on focusing our attention on these topics and how to facilitate them in a proper manner. So how did the name, or how did Courageous Conversations come about? We did research from across the board, other industries, not necessarily the transportation industry, because there is not a lot of conversations happening within the transportation industry. So we borrowed this idea from looking outside of there and came up with a name. As it's easy to go with the flow, but it's not as easy, and it takes courage to actually speak out, have these conversations and have a judgment-free zone, and where you're listening to everyone's point of views, not getting worked up about it, but allowing yourself to open up, be respectful of other topics, and asking those dumb questions where everyone is afraid to ask them, especially in a company-wide setting. So those smaller groups that we break out to are actually very important, because it's easier to ask that dumb question in front of 5 people instead of 200 people. So like I said, a lot of these conversations do have the small breakout series, which we have gathered have been very, very beneficial. So kind of as Marie said, the Courageous Conversations came about as there were a lot of events a couple years ago in the Twin Cities that caused a lot of unrest and left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. And so there was quite a few people that spoke up and said, what can we do with this? We're feeling this in our personal lives, and it's maybe kind of trickling into our work life. So how do we approach this, just to open up the conversation and kind of make people maybe feel a little bit better, and to bring people together, because it also coincidentally was going through the wonderful time of COVID where everyone was by themselves a lot more and different things like that. So we started having this open place where we could talk about these issues, especially where it's highly politicized now in our society. And so we use this tool to create awareness and bring about the inequality that's going on. Like I said, these inequalities are not only affected in our workplace, but in our daily lives on a personal level as well. And so it allows us as individuals and as our organizations to grow and to continue to build on that and to make it a better environment for everyone. So the conversation series kind of has a general layout where it's 100% volunteer. We're not mandating anyone to go. And so we want people to be there. We want people to speak up and to participate. Whether or not you attend, or with busy schedules, we understand we can't make them all. So these topics we typically present on provide a lot of times not only in our life, but also areas that we work in the transportation industry specifically, which I'll be going into further detail about. The general format, we typically start with a presentation, kind of an overall PowerPoint, and then we break out into small groups where we ask questions and we start that conversation, and then we're hoping from there we have some free flow conversations as well. And then at the end we come back in, have a large group discussion, and then a lot of times we end with some takeaway material or further information that they can learn more about. So if there's a topic that really hits home and they want to learn about events happening or do more research about it, then they're allowed to do that. For some of our series, we do require reading or viewing of documents, or I know there's a documentary that people were asked to watch ahead of time just to give that background knowledge. And as stated as well, we do not record these series because we want people to open up and really talk about them. We don't want people to be worried about backlash or about someone listening in and having that judgment as well. So that's kind of a very important piece we like to stress about as well. As Marie mentioned, we did do a company-wide gray area thinking schedule that we did. And so based off of that, our first Courageous Conversation was actually about implicit bias. So ahead of this conversation, we were actually all asked to take a quiz. And this quiz, it was kind of quick thinking, shoot, you just clicked on questions and answers, not even thinking about it. And it was to actually make you aware of your impartial bias that you don't even know about. And a lot of it was focused on gender and then age. So, the question might be, who do you think is more in depth to do this? And you would click, and whether it would be a 50-year-old man or a 20-year-old woman, something kind of like that. And so it made you much more aware of your natural bias that you've kind of been built up on all these years, and then it allows you to kind of peel that banana back and focus on how you change a little bit of your way of thinking. And so it was a good starting point to just make people more aware of what's going on, and it led to that free and open conversation of, oh man, I wasn't aware that I even thought about this, or I kind of looked at people like this. And so it was a really good starting point as far as leading off our courageous conversations. The next courageous conversation was Jim Crow of the North. So ahead of time we were asked to watch a documentary. And if a lot of people are not familiar about this, it's actually about racial covenants. That this one specifically talked about the Twin Cities areas, but this was a nationwide problem. And so essentially in 1934, they passed this Fair Housing Act, which was supposed to help stabilize the housing market, but it actually created the definition of redlining, which basically ranked residential neighborhoods on hazardous investments, which was based on adverse factors such as having people of color live in certain neighborhoods. And so this would divide different neighborhoods or make other neighborhoods more predominant, and it actually prevented people from living in certain neighborhoods. And so it did actually happen in the Twin Cities, so it hit pretty close to home. And those covenants were into effect for years. Finally in the 1960s, they started removing those, but there are covenants still in effect, whether or not they're actually implemented now, but they are still in effect. And so, it's working on getting those removed and doing that. But similar to a lot of these issues, it takes time to redo or, remove the damage that was already done. And so that's kind of the key point is, yes, we can acknowledge the damage, but what do we do in the future? And that, unfortunately, it does take time. Our next series was Rondo Beyond the Pavement. So this is based on the Rondo community. Once again, it's in a St. Paul community. It was a community that was very vibrant and alive, and it was a Black-based community. They had a nice neighborhood where they would host events year-round, and they had a lot of businesses, and they were thriving really big. At the same time, I-94 was built. The option was to basically decided that they put I-94 right through the middle of this community. And so it pretty much wiped out about 80% of the community. And so the community was split in half. Businesses were bought out, houses were bought out. It wiped out the community as a whole because a lot of people weren't able to survive. Whether or not their business wasn't taken due to the I-94 corridor, they still lost half of their community members. So how do you survive with half the people coming into your stores or different things like that? And a lot of the times, even the compensation that they got was not fair. And a lot of times, based on the research, is they chose these neighborhoods because there was less resistance, because it was easy. They didn't have a voice. And so to give them their voice was very difficult for them. The effects of this is actually still being obviously felt today. They have started rebuilding this Rondo community, and they now actually host Rondo Day events where they bring back, they have a plaza, they bring back dancing and different activities that were done previously to the I-94 corridor being built, which is kind of the best part of silver lining of this incident. The next series was Planning for Disabilities. I'm assuming everyone can relate to this, especially in the transportation industry and working with ADA and all those wonderful requirements. So we actually brought, we have a lot of ADA experts in our company that focus just on ADA. So we brought those members in to help facilitate this courageous conversations. So we talked about what is a disability, the differences between visual and non-visual disabilities. A person might look like a perfectly normal human being, but they might have some sort of a disability. And so to maybe recognize that, or to realize how to fix those or how to help with those problems. Obviously, as an able human being, it might be difficult to realize the everyday struggles that they go through, whether it's using side locks, and what if they run into a side lock where their wheelchair can't fit through? What do they do? Are they trying to jump the curb and actually going into traffic? Do they have to turn around and find a new path? So those were the topics of conversations, and how we can make it actually more accessible to them. Some takeaways that we definitely focused on were people with disabilities are just like us. They a lot of times have normal jobs and lives, and they try to live as much as they possibly can. And differences actually make everyone unique. It allows everyone to have a voice. It makes for a good conversation, makes for new ideas, which we're all looking for as well. Some disabilities, as I stated, you can see, and some you can't. So you can't always judge a book by its cover. So be aware. And a disability does not define who you are. And so we want to make sure it's accessible to everyone, so that they are part of the community, and that they feel as one as well, and not necessarily pushed to the side or othered. So part of our ADA experts, they also gave us some do's and don'ts with respects to projects that we're working on, and how, some of the best practices that we can use to push forward with our projects. I know a lot of roadway projects, transit projects do involve ADA, and so just taking a closer look and bringing some of those real life experiences into our designs to actually make it better than standard is our goal as a company. And also, we try to get that across in this presentation as well. The next courageous conversation we did was based on tribal nations. At SRF, we've been working a lot with tribal nations, and so to better inform our staff on how tribal nations works, since there is a little bit of gray area, as you guys probably heard in the previous speech, tribal nations are their own sovereignty. So they are their own nations. They have essentially their own DOT system or department as well. And so making sure that we're not only following the standards of that specific state, but also following their standards and their culture and respecting it as well. So as part of the tribal nation portion, we did talk about land acknowledgements. I'm assuming most people do not know what that is, but it's essentially a statement that we acknowledge on our projects that the projects we do, or the lands that we are actually on ancestral lands, and it's a nodding to a fact that the indigenous people once lived here. So we give a nod, and we acknowledge the history of violence, displacement, that migration and settlement. So we try to acknowledge the good and the bad of the history of tribal nations and how it came about, and that has led us to where we are now. Similar to the previous conversations that we talked about, there was an ugly part of history, and now we're trying to rebuild that, but it takes a lot longer to rebuild what the damage that we've done. And so understanding that land acknowledgement on top of that tribal sovereignty, and that they are their own entity, they have their own powers, and to make sure that we're respecting their powers and their government is also very important. So we talked about the tribal nations that we specifically have in the Midwest, as we work with tribes in Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, and some of the Nebraskas as well. So making sure that they know that there's different tribes, and each tribe does things differently. And so how we build those relationships with those tribal members is very important, as there is a lot of mistrust in other people, not within their reservations and in their tribes. And so we did do some best practices as well, such as the mini blueprint, similar to what we've discussed, that understanding that every tribe is different, just like every human being is different. So you don't want to generalize to them. We want to listen to them and let them be heard, which is a whole part of this courageous conversation as well. We want to listen. We want to hear what people are saying and be respectful of that and have those engaging conversations. we want to be transparent to everyone. We want to be transparent to those clients and make sure that we're fighting and supporting them the best that we can. We also want to learn about their culture, because learning about every different culture will make us better human beings, but it can also make us do our job better. We understand what their problems are, what their needs are, and how we can help them to the best of our ability is really what we want. And then to understand and be sensitive to their culture as well is very important. So we do have 2 future courageous conversations for 2023. The first one is equity and transportation. So we are going to specifically focus on the I-35 westbound, how it was built in Minneapolis and the displacement of those families there, and how this, similar to the Rondo, it's a nationwide trend, and how the least resistance of the Black neighborhoods were affected, and how we can learn from it and go from there. And then the other one is gender disparities and how we can make it more equal as well for all genders. We're looking forward to doing these 2 topics and then continuing to brainstorm future conversations in the future as well.
So I'm going to just wrap up here, so we have time for some questions at the end. So some insights here that I wanted to share, which of course I can't find now. To share on how you could get started, right? So again, as I mentioned, putting together this DEI committee and putting together the initiatives, you need to have support from and attendance by your leadership. It demonstrates that the company is really committed to that effort. You do have to find balance between background, high-level conversations, and technical skills and knowledge. It is a team effort. The committee members, again, need to be involved. And then we do bring in subject experts, matter experts, so that, again, we're well educated when we're passing on this information. We are excited to continue this series. It helps well that we have a hybrid workplace. So we have some people that are working at home, certain days in the office. But what we try to do is we try to mix it up. We try to have it at lunchtime. Another day we might try to have it at 9 o'clock. Sometimes we have it in person. So we want a variety so that we can, again, reach the highest number of employees. And again, sometimes the dialogue is awkward, but discomfort is what sparks growth and progress in the company. So I think the only other thing I have is that we do have additional information that's available. And then wondering if anybody has any questions for us.
I have a question and a comment, and I think I'll start with the comment. I just wanted to point out, you talked about invisible disabilities. And my husband was a severe hemophiliac. He passed away last March. And when we first moved to Bismarck, 1994, what did we see in the Bismarck Tribune but a story about this woman who confronted somebody who parked in a handicapped parking spot at Target, and they weren't in a wheelchair. And she reamed them right out and called the police. You know, I bet for the first year we were in town, my husband wouldn't go anywhere. He couldn't walk very far, but he didn't want to be confined to a wheelchair. So you have to understand disability and the use of those spots is not confined to somebody in a wheelchair. I just had to point out.
No, thank you for sharing that.
And, you know, he would have loved to have gone to sporting events, but when we first moved to Bismarck, there really was no accommodation for handicapped people, even if he was in a wheelchair. And so it was impossible. And those are things that are quality of life issues. So just keep that in mind. And then I wanted to ask, when did 94 go through the Rondo development, the community?
I don't remember the years. Was it this? I want to say the 60s. if I remember correctly, but I would have to look for sure.
Right, that makes sense. I was just wondering, how it compared to the admin and NEPA and those considerations.
Right.
Any other questions?
When you guys do trainings, do people get certificates at the end? So like if there's already established like leadership trainings and stuff in an organization, and let's say you need credit or something along those lines, would that be a possibility to provide like a certificate of attendance or I don't know, something along those lines?
Yeah, so part of my job, I oversee HR, and we do have individuals that keep track of your PDHs for your PEs, your planning hours and whatnot. And trust me, our staff asks, anytime we have anything, they're like, can we get some credit for that, right? So we do try to make sure any of our sessions, anything that we do, brown bags, that we do make sure that there is enough background and documentation so that they can get credits for it.
So from what I gathered, the push for this was coming mostly from newer employees or younger generation. How was the receptiveness of those with that for a while with the initiative projects?
Okay, good question. Well, I think in general, again, I've been here for 30 years. I think in general, the younger employees, the newer employees challenge us every day. And that's not a bad thing. Anything that we're doing, right? They question everything. Not everything. They ask questions, but they're the ones who keep things new and interesting. For instance, we have some, I don't know how else you say it, but we have by levels. We have our managers group, we have our leads group, and these are levels of classifications. They have quarterly meetings and whatnot. We never had a group for our grads up until maybe you get your registration. So what they do, they asked us, right? So they have the Rising Professionals group, and it's our largest group, obviously, right? And the thing that made me proud of them is for directors and our VPs, we have a spring business meeting and a fall business meeting. Everybody knows it's all day long, right? We have financial stuff and all these kinds of things. But the Rising Professionals came to me and said, can we do a half-day Rising Professionals, what is it called? Not a conference, but a half-day session, right? And in addition, they wanted us to fly in, let all our outside, it's a big number, outside offices come to our Minneapolis office. So what we did is we said, as long as you develop an agenda, right? We wanted to have an agenda that had some technical stuff. We wanted some that had soft skills, right? We wanted maybe some leadership. We wanted to be able to see the agenda, the speakers, and then I was able to then get approval for that. They were able to do that, but there were some other maybe levels that were like, I heard they had a half-day session. Why is that? We don't have one. I'm like, well, because they asked, right? So of course they're asking. Other groups are now asking this year because they didn't have one, but that's what they do as a young group. So I don't think anyone was against it, but again, some people may have been uncomfortable, like, do we have to do this? But as they start to get more involved, they realize that, right, our staff are the most important, and to make them happy, right, we have to get used to new ideas. So it has been going well.
I also would say, just to add to that, is our leadership has kind of gotten, I don't want to say younger, but we have gotten more diverse. More diverse than when I started 11 years old, like 11 years ago. It was kind of people near retirement when I started, and so, they almost have I don't want to say the old school thinking of, it's not broken, let's not fix it, and so our leadership committee is definitely a lot more open and supportive of all of our staff members, which does help compared to when I started 11 years ago.
And I will say for me, I make them uncomfortable. uncomfortable. That's my job. So I do. I mean, I don't know, you don't know me very well, but I do question and bring things to our senior management team all the time. And I have to be prepared for, what are you talking about? But I do make them uncomfortable because I think we need to continue to do that.
And it does help having you
Yeah.
to push the boundaries a little bit more as well, which is very helpful from the younger staff perspective. If they have someone that they can reach out to that is in the leadership that will help kind of facilitate those points that need to be adjusted up, does really help as well, so.
After implementing this company-wide, what changes have you noticed or seen that you can speak of? What's been the impact company-wide?
I think more people are joining in and getting more involved, and a supervisor that may not be as involved when we go out to the community, we pack food, right? But now we have a supervisor who knows that their staff is going, and they show up, which again, I tell them you need to show up, right? But they are showing up, and everybody knows retention and recruiting staff is a challenge for private firms. But when they see their supervisor take the time to be there with them, they're finally seeing the return in that relationship.
I would also say even as well is our calendar observance. It does allow people we have those personal stories. So if you see that so-and-so wrote that story, it's a good way to reach out and we may be like, hey, you shared this story about Holly, which that's what we had last month. And so it allows that person to reach out to you and be like, I want to learn more, or can you share something else? Or they know that that person maybe has that religious belief. And so it allows them to reach out to them and ask those questions and kind of get to know your coworkers on a more personal level as well, which has been good.
Well, if I understood you correctly, you guys had to basically cut off your participation because it was too high.
Yeah.
So how did you rotate in the additional people and try to keep the group fresh?
So I change them out every year. So a couple things that I had to do, because we had some professional committee members that wanted to be on every committee, right? So I started to say you could only be on one committee at a time. So you can't be on our staff engagement committee, our social committee that plans all our parties, and so you have to pick one, right? And then I also had to think hard about, we did not want the whole committee to be from our civil design group or from our traffic group. We wanted to make sure that there was one from our LAs, our right-of-way, right, and our corporate services, right, so our admin, or our graphics and marketing. So I wanted to have diversity in our services in that group. I also wanted, and I can say it because I'm older, I wanted age differences. I didn't want a whole group of young people, right? I didn't want a whole group of old people, so it was a variety. But then I had to write an email saying, unfortunately you can't. I save the emails, I'm pretty organized, and then I take that list for the next year, reach out, are they interested, and then we continue to go over.
And I think we also try to go, like she stated, we have 7 offices, so we do try to grab members from different offices as well. Like I'm located in Fargo, so I have probably never met half the people in person. But we're able to have those conversations as well, and we do participate from regional offices, as she said, which helps us a lot.
I'm interested in the land acknowledgements that you talked about. Are those included on all projects? And have you run into any clients that don't want them included?
We don't do them on all projects. I know it kind of depends on the type of project that we're doing, and then also who we're working with. And a lot of times we will reach out to the client prior to holding a land acknowledgement as well. I know that specifically there was one done in Twin Cities, and so we talked to the client, made sure it was okay prior to the event that was being held. I don't remember if it was a field review event or something like that, and so they brought it to those members ahead of time and made sure it was okay.
prior to doing any larger group. So it's just making sure we're communicating with our clients.
Any more?
I just have a kind of a logistical question. So how do you find the speakers? Are they with the DE&I committee that you select to give a presentation, or like with the upcoming gender disparity? Do you have someone outside come in to talk about that, or do you give them training prior to, or how does that all work?
So I love to delegate, so I don't take any of that on. If they come up with a topic, then I just say, pull it together. And they know that they can have a speaker, right? But they literally just put together a proposal, just give me 5 bullets on what it's gonna entail, right? And then I can ask them questions, but they, again, they do all the work. Because it's really their conversation that they want to have, right? I'm not gonna say this is what I want to talk about, right? So that's where it does help, because then they really believe in it. And, you know, obviously we want to be cost effective, so we try to say, okay, let's reach within the firm first, right? Or past speakers that we've had, and they really just take it on.
So the committee essentially just leads the presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now what they can do is, for this gender disparities, is we also have another committee. It's the Women's Forum, right? So we're trying to do more, because we went through a time when, you know, let's just say engineers, they were having kids and then they would quit. And so we were losing a lot of our moms, right? And the challenge of work life, right? So what can we do to listen to them? How can we provide support? And whatnot. So we do have a women's forum. So I do believe they are teaming with our DEI committee on that topic to see who are the best speakers, right? Because the women's forum is all levels of leadership, women, and they're going to work together to get the right speakers for that.
Any other questions? Not seeing it. So thank you so much, Marie.